Have you ever felt like you're always running, but never arriving? Like some invisible force is pulling you back every time you try to move forward? It's not bad luck. It's not the world. It's you. And the worst part? You don't even realize it. Because self-sabotage never comes screaming. It comes whispering in your own voice. It wears the mask of doubt, of perfectionism, of waiting for the right moment. It's that thought that repeats itself. I'm not ready yet. But Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that's exactly what you're doing. Calling fate what is really just unprocessed fear. You think you're being cautious, but in truth you're just postponing your life. You wait for the perfect sign, for full courage, for the ideal scenario. But they never come. Because what truly paralyzes you isn't out there. It's what you refuse to face within. The truth is simple but brutal. You sabotage yourself because deep down you still believe you don't deserve what you desire. Yes, you dream big, but underneath, you still carry the programming that says you're not enough, that you'll be rejected, that you'll fail. And so you create distractions, excuses, addictions, procrastination. You call it exhaustion when it's actually fear. You call it humility when it's actually self-abandonment. And day after day, you betray yourself. With small concessions, broken promises, and silences where there should be truth. You abandon yourself to please, to avoid conflict, to not make anyone uncomfortable. But every time you deny yourself, your unconscious registers, I don't deserve this. And each time that happens, the self-sabotage grows. Quiet, subtle, lethal, and it knows you better than anyone. It knows exactly where your insecurities live. It remembers the memories that still hurt. It knows how to make you quit without feeling like failure. Just one more lost day, one more abandoned idea, one more opportunity you won't take. And you call that normal. But that normal is killing you inside. Because the problem isn't making mistakes. The problem is never truly trying. It's living on the edges of your own life. It's watching your potential from a distance as if it belonged to someone else. You say you'll change, but wake up each day betraying yourself in the details, in the habits, in the choices. Jung taught that what you repress doesn't disappear. It just hides, waiting for an opening. And self-sabotage is exactly that. The unconscious crying out, using your own behaviors to confront you. Every act of sabotage is a message, a signal, a wake-up call. You say, I'm confused. But confusion is just a curtain to avoid making a decision. You say, it's not the right time. But the right time will never come if you keep putting yourself last. The truth is, you already know what you need to do. You just don't have the courage to face yourself. And meanwhile, your soul gets tired. Because there is nothing more exhausting than wanting to go and not letting yourself. Wanting to become sure and holding yourself back. Wanting to change and choosing sabotage instead. Maybe it's time to stop looking for explanations and start listening to the silence. Because the unconscious speaks, through symptoms, through patterns, through the kind of tiredness that sleep can't cure, through the emptiness that nothing seems to fill, through the fear that grips you every time you get close to something too big. Jung called this the process of shadow integration, the journey of looking directly at everything you pretend not to be, everything you've hidden, everything you've judged and pushed away that still lives inside of you. Because that's what sabotages you, the parts you haven't integrated, the parts you still refuse to accept, and as long as that shadow is in charge, you'll keep going in circles, moving forward a little, only to fall back again. But what if today, you simply decided to stop running? Not to give up, but to finally face it, because what you don't face chases you. What you don't heal repeats itself, and what you don't accept controls you. You think you're just tired, that you're overwhelmed, that maybe life is just too much right now. But what if I told you that beneath that tiredness is something darker, something you've unconsciously built to protect yourself from the very things you claim to want? Self-sabotage is not laziness, it's not weakness, it's a survival strategy. crafted in silence, sharpened by trauma, and reinforced by every time you were punished for being too much or not enough. Carl Jung called it the shadow, everything you've denied, repressed, and refused to look at. Not because you are bad, but because you were told that parts of you were unacceptable. So you buried them. And now those same parts have found another way to speak, through hesitation, through fear, through self-doubt, that shows up just when you're about to take a leap. Every excuse you make is not just avoidance, it's a voice from your unconscious saying, don't go there, it's not safe. And yet you still wonder, why do I keep pulling myself back? The truth is, you've been trained to shrink when you should stand tall, trained to second guess when you should decide, trained to wait for permission when you were born to lead yourself. But your inner child still remembers the pain of being too visible, too emotional, too different. And so, to protect yourself from future wounds, you became your own captor, building cages made of hesitation, perfectionism, and silence. And here's the terrifying part. The longer you live inside these cages, the more you forget they're not part of who you are. You start to believe that this fear is your identity. That playing small is wisdom. That holding back is maturity, but that's not maturity. That's fear wearing a mask. Self-sabotage is a ritual, one you've repeated so many times that it feels sacred. You abandon your plans before they abandon you. You walk away from love before you're left. You destroy what's good before it has the chance to prove you wrong. Because deep inside you believe one devastating lie: I don't deserve it. But Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. You think you're cursed, but you're just programmed to associate discomfort with danger and safety with stagnation. You stay where it's familiar, not because it's good for you, but because your nervous system is addicted to predictability, even when that predictability is filled with pain. And here's how the sabotage unfolds. You get inspired. You see the possibility. You feel a spark, and then a whisper. You're not ready. Who do you think you are? What if you fail? And that's enough. One whisper to collapse the entire vision. Not because the dream was wrong, but because the wound was still open. So you retreat. Not into rest, but into paralysis. Not into solitude, but into shame. And no one sees it. Because you've learned to hide it behind smiles, responsibilities, or the performance of having it all together. But inside, you're crumbling. Because you've lived more for others than you've ever lived for yourself. And you call that loyalty. But loyalty to others at the cost of loyalty to yourself is not love. It's abandonment. Self-abandonment disguised as kindness. Jung taught that true wholeness comes not from perfection, but from integration. And integration requires brutal honesty. The kind that looks in the mirror and says, I've been the one standing in my way. Not life, not the world, not fate, me, and it hurts. It will break something inside you. But that break is sacred. Because only when something breaks can something deeper begin. You want healing? Then stop numbing. You want transformation? Then stop pretending. You want power? Then stop running from the part of you that sabotages everything, because that part is not your enemy. It's the wounded protector, the child who never felt safe, the version of you that still believes love must be earned and peace must be paid for in pain. But now, it's your turn. To reparent, to reclaim, to respond differently. And the first step is this: no more lies, not to yourself, not to your potential, not to the dreams you keep postponing in the name of survival. It's time to stop surviving and start becoming. Because the longer you wait to break this pattern, the more your soul will whisper, this is not the life I came here to live. And those whispers, they never really stop. They only get louder. You think you're making conscious choices, that you're in control, that your life is shaped by logic, plans, and free will. But beneath all that, something else is guiding you. Not your goals, not your clarity, but your shadow. Carl Jung didn't describe the shadow as evil. He described it as everything you refuse to admit about yourself. The impulses you hide, the truths you avoid, the fears you rationalize, and the dreams you silently kill. That's what's making your decisions. That's what's saying yes when you should say no. That's what's keeping you in relationships that drain you, jobs that numb you, routines that deaden your soul. Because the shadow doesn't want expansion. It wants repetition. It wants familiarity. It wants to replay the wound, not heal it. So every time you're at the edge of something new, the shadow steps in. It reminds you of the last time you failed. It echoes the voice that once told you you're not enough. It activates the survival program. And suddenly you back off. Not because the opportunity wasn't right, but because you still believe you're wrong. That's the lie. That you must first be perfect, complete, fully healed before taking action. But wholeness is not a destination. It's a process, a decision, a war you fight within yourself daily. Because the shadow doesn't disappear, it integrates. And integration is not about conquering your darkness. It's about listening to it, understanding what it's protecting, decoding what it's really. Trying to say, you sabotage yourself not because you're weak, but because you're still waiting for permission. Permission to want more, to be seen, to rise, to outgrow the version of yourself that others still expect to see. But no one will give you that permission, especially not the parts of you that are terrified of what you'll become. Because becoming more means risking loss. It means someone might not recognize you anymore, might say you've changed, might leave, and a deep, primitive part of you would rather stay small than risk abandonment. But here's the deeper truth: you are already abandoned by yourself. Every time you silence your truth to preserve peace, every time you dim your light to avoid judgment, every time you trade authenticity for acceptance. Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And he was right. Because accepting yourself fully means you'll have to disappoint people. You'll have to say no. You'll have to walk away. You'll have to stop explaining. And most terrifying of all, you'll have to face the parts of you you've kept in the dark. But that's the gateway. That's the place where transformation begins. Because when you look directly into the eyes of your shadow, it stops controlling you. It becomes a guide, a compass, a messenger. And then something extraordinary happens. Your choices change. Not just your big dramatic life decisions, but the small, daily ones. You no longer respond to every demand. You don't chase after those who pull away. You stop explaining your worth. You stop begging to be understood. You become quiet, still rooted. And in that stillness there is power. Because people who know who they are don't rush to prove it. This is where individuation begins. Not in becoming someone new, but in finally returning to who you were before the world told you to be someone else. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about remembering yourself. The child who once dreamed without limits. The teenager who felt deeply even when it hurt. The adult who still has a voice buried beneath performance and fear, whispering, there is more. You've always known there was more. But every time you got close, the shadow reminded you, more is dangerous. More means change. Change means risk. Risk means pain. And so you stayed. You created a life you could survive, but not one you could thrive in. But survival is not your destiny. It was just a phase, a coping mechanism, a bridge. And maybe now, you're standing at the end of that bridge, looking across at the life that could be yours. If only you stopped standing in your own way. If only you were willing to burn the scripts, break the patterns, face the guilt, feel the fear, and still move forward. That's the paradox of healing. It doesn't make you invincible, it just makes you honest. Honest enough to say, I've been lying to myself. I've been hiding behind safety. I've been afraid of being seen in my fullness, and now I'm ready to be whole, even if it costs me comfort. Because comfort is not peace, control is not safety, numbness is not healing, and silence is not strength, unless it's the silence of someone who finally knows who they are. There comes a moment when exhaustion becomes sacred, when the weariness you feel is no longer just from overwork or stress, but from betraying yourself too many times, from silencing your truth so others could speak louder, from delaying your becoming so you could remain digestible, and eventually, something breaks. Not a breakdown, a breakthrough. The subtle crack in the mask you've worn for years, the shiver in your voice when you finally say, I can't do this anymore. Carl Jung believed that this rupture, the collapse of the false self, is where the real self begins to emerge. Because the self is not born in victory, it is born in surrender. Not to weakness, but to reality. And the reality is this: you've been carrying the weight of a life built to protect wounds, not fulfill dreams. But what happens when you set that weight down? At first, silence. Not peace yet, just silence. Unfamiliar, uncomfortable. You'll feel lost. You'll question yourself. You'll feel like a stranger in your own skin. That's normal. Because when you stop living on autopilot, you lose the illusion of control. You grieve the version of you that knew how to perform, how to please, how to pretend. And in that grief, something new begins. Clarity. Not the kind that comes in one glorious moment, but the slow, gentle unraveling of lies, the recognition of patterns, the mourning of time wasted, the realization that every step away from yourself was, in some strange way, bringing you back home. You were never broken. You were just fragmented, split into roles, expectations, masks. But beneath all of them was you, the you that doesn't need to impress, the you that doesn't need to be understood by everyone. The you that knows your value is not in your usefulness, but in your essence. This is where self-sabotage ends, not with force, but with awareness. When you no longer need to destroy the good because you finally believe you deserve it. When you stop running, not because the fear is gone, but because your longing for truth is stronger than your fear of pain. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the sacred journey of returning to yourself, of gathering your lost pieces, of integrating your darkness, of becoming whole not by escaping your wounds, but by walking through them with your eyes wide open. And yes, this path is lonely, not because you'll always be alone, but because, for the first time, you are no longer abandoning yourself to be accepted. And that will cost you people. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you every illusion you once clung to for safety. But what you gain yourself. Your voice becomes steady. Your boundaries become sacred. Your presence becomes undeniable, not loud, not aggressive, but unshakable. Because there is nothing more powerful than a human being who is no longer at war with themselves. You begin to choose differently. You say no without guilt. You leave before you're emptied. You rest without earning it. You speak without shrinking. You love without disappearing. And most importantly, you show up for you. That is the rebirth, the life after self-sabotage. The version of you that doesn't wait for permission, doesn't live on borrowed beliefs, doesn't keep proving you're worthy. Because you've remembered. You always were, but be warned. Not everyone will celebrate your becoming. Some will call you selfish, others will say you've changed. Many will try to pull you back into the role that made them comfortable, and you'll be tempted to explain, to apologize, to soften your truth. Don't, because this is the moment where most people retreat, where they undo their growth for the sake of old approval. But not you, not now. Now is the moment you claim it, not with a scream, but with a whisper that echoes through every choice you make. I choose me. That's it. No drama, no declaration. Just a steady, quiet revolution inside your soul. The shadow no longer runs the show. The mask has been set down. And the self, your real self, has stepped forward. Unapologetic. Unavailable for anything that disturbs your peace. Unshakable in your inner knowing. And whole in ways that no validation could ever give you. So now I ask you, are you ready to stop shrinking? Are you ready to stop performing? Are you ready to become what you've always been beneath the fear? Because self-sabotage ends not when you become perfect, but when you become present. And that changes everything.